Chapter 333 Four Great Evil Soul Masters. Shu Sanchi's body jerked. He had been together with Jiang Nanan for quite some time. However, he had always been the one taking the initiative. Jiang Nanan rarely responded to his confessions. Now that she said such words, how could he not feel surprised and shocked at the same time? All right. If something like that happens, I'll kill you first before I die with you. At least you won't be alone. Poi. Can the two of you not sound so inauspicious? Xiao couldn't help but butt in. He K2 touched Xiao's head and said, all right, everyone calm down. Let's prepare for the team round. Yuao, you'll still command the team round. All right. Yuao was a little unsteady right now. He looked at the pale and unconscious Bei as he bit his lips. Everything was caused by the Holy Ghost Church. They made Teacher Xiaoya like that. It's because of them that eldest Senior and Teacher Xiaoya are in so much pain. They must pay the price. Yuao wasn't just a junior to Bei and Tanya. The two of them had changed his life. Through being a member of the Tang Sect and entering Shrek Academy, he had managed to experience what a family was. He had felt warmth. He had found teachers and gained everything that belonged to him now. Although Yuao was one of the youngest in the Tang Sect, he was still the third person to join the sect. He was only behind Bei and Tanya. In his heart, Bei and Tanya were like his real siblings. He didn't feel any less tormented than Bei after Tanya and Ma Xiaodao disappeared. He felt the same as Bei every time he saw the loneliness in Bei's eyes. He had developed a calm heart after going through the training of the ultimate soldier plan. However, this sense of calm had merely repressed his emotional side. This repression wasn't effective all the time. However, once the repression was overcome, the emotions he felt became even more intense. After all, humans weren't machines. It was just like how he risked everything for Wang Donga. He didn't care as he proceeded to the ice fire Yin Yang well and practically exchanged his life for the medicinal herb. As he saw how sorrowful and tormented Bei was, and how Tanya was taken away by the scorpion tiger Douluo, the pain that he felt slowly turned into a burning furnace of pure fury. He had not felt such a deep hatred in a long time. He swore to himself that he would completely destroy the Holy Ghost Church one day. His anxious expression turned cold. The training he had gone through in the ultimate soldier plan was no longer able to repress his emotions. However, he was able to tolerate the fury he felt just as he was experiencing an emotional outburst. Wang Donga was a little worried as she looked at Yuao. She pressed her hands against his shoulders and gently massaged them. She spent the most time with him and was the clearest about his emotional ups and downs. She could clearly sense the cold intent that Yuao was letting out. It was obvious to her that he was infuriated. Yuao lifted his right hand to tap Wang Donga's hand. He signaled to her that he hadn't lost control of his emotions. He slowly shut his eyes and waited for the match to begin. Shu Sanchi carried Bei away and sent him to the resting area. He passed him over to Nana, Ji Juiken, and Jing Zian before returning to the waiting area. Despicable Holy Ghost Sect. My hatred won't be sated unless I destroy them. Yuao, let's use that move. A vicious look flashed across Shu Sanchi's eyes. The expressions of everyone from the Tang Sect turned cold. Bei's injury had not just angered Yuao, but all of them. At this point, Wang Qiu stood up. No one from the Tang Sect expected this. She walked towards them. This wasn't allowed by the rules. However, no one had expected this to happen. When the staff members realized what was happening, Wang Qiu was already in the waiting area. She lowered her head and said a few words to Wang Donga and Yuao as she stood in between them. Wang Donga was stunned and twisted her head to look at her. Yuao hesitated for a moment before looking at Wang Donga. Eventually, he nodded. Wang Qiu revealed a persistent look. I'm only repaying you a personal favor. Okay. Yuao didn't feel like speaking too much at the moment. The staff members ran over at this point. Wang Qiu straightened and glared at them coldly. Who was this golden dragon lady? She had the most supporters in this tournament, even though she came from Shrek Academy. All the staff members stopped when she glared coldly at them. After that, they just watched as she walked back to her resting area. However, no one noticed that there was something different about Wang Qiu before and after she talked to Yuao. 15 minutes passed in a flash. On the stage, the 5 members from the Tang Sect stood up at the same time when Zhang Zan asked the competing members from both teams to enter the stage. Wang Donga pushed Yuao's wheelchair up on the stage first, and the other 4 followed behind. There was an austere aura subtly rising from them. On the other side, the remaining 4 members of the Holy Ghost Sect also ascended the stage. The 4 of them had different figures. However, they were all young men. The person in the lead had been seated at the last position earlier in the waiting area. This person was also the largest of all the Holy Ghost Sect team members. He was even bigger than Iketu, with extremely broad shoulders. As he walked in front of them, the other 3 were completely blocked behind him. The 4 of them came to the center of the stage and faced the 6 from the Tang Sect. Even though they were outnumbered, the aura that they exuded didn't seem to be inferior. They released a cold and eerie power from their bodies, and the temperature seemed to be dropping. Both parties, please report your names, Zhang Zan said. He knew that this might be the most difficult fight he was going to referee, even though neither team was at full strength. If the 10 of them fought against him, he knew that it wouldn't be easy to defeat them, especially the 4 mysterious evil soul masters. Zhang Zan could tell that Bei was able to defeat 2 of his opponents earlier because he had a natural element that could suppress evil soul masters. However, did the rest of the Tang Sect possess such abilities? Evil soul masters couldn't be measured using logic. There was once an evil soul master that had killed 10 soul masters at the same cultivation level as him. There were 4 such evil soul masters right now. No one knew what they were capable of, because they had never appeared in the earlier rounds. The evil soul masters that had competed in the earlier rounds were all in the resting area now. They were undoubtedly the substitutes for these last few evil soul masters on stage right now. Tang Sect, Yuao. As the acting team leader, Yuao reported his name first. Tang Sect, Iketu. Tang Sect, Shu Sanchi. Tang Sect, Jiang Nanan. Tang Sect, Xiao. Tang Sect, Wang Donga. The 6 of them used the simplest method of reporting their names. They had no intention of concealing the killing intent that came from their bodies. The largest person from the Holy Ghost Sect said, Holy Ghost Sect, Lu Gengjang. Holy Ghost Sect, Yanfeng. Holy Ghost Sect, Tang Dai. Holy Ghost Sect, Uu. 4 people, 4 different voices. Lu Gengjang's voice was loud and clear. This was rare among evil soul masters. Not only did he not sound eerie, he even seemed quite vibrant. Of the 3 behind him, Yanfeng had the most ordinary figure. However, the aura that he exuded was the coldest and creepiest. He felt like a creepy venomous snake. Tang Dai hid his aura the best. Just from his aura, it felt like he was an ordinary person. Yuao couldn't even sense any soul power undulations from his body. He was quite tall, only half a head shorter than Lu Gengjang, but quite scrawny. Uu was very stocky. His shoulders were almost as broad as Lu Gengjang's, but his height reached just past Lu Gengjang's waist. As the 4 of them stood there, the first feeling that they gave off was unevenly matched. Both parties, please withdraw and prepare for the start of the fight. Zhang Zan instructed them. The 10 of them turned around at almost the same time and walked towards their respective sides of the stage. As they moved, Yuao activated his spiritual detection. He also used his imitation to conceal his soul rings. With his spiritual detection, Yuao naturally didn't need to use words to communicate with his teammates. On the other side, the 4 evil soul masters didn't seem to interact with one another at all. They weren't rushing, either. They also walked slowly over to their side of the stage. Zhang Zan lifted his right hand as both parties reached their respective sides of the stage. It was a sign to everyone that they should prepare for the match to begin. The Tang Sect quickly set up their formation. They did it differently from the previous rounds. This time, Shu Sanchi wasn't in front. Iketu was. Xiao was on the left in the second row, while Jiang Nanan was on the right. Shu Sanchi was standing behind Wang Donga. Wang Donga and Yuao were in the back row. The 6 of them formed a very weird cross shape with everyone standing in front of Shu Sanchi. Zhang Zan was a little stunned when he saw their formation. What's this formation? The strategy of the Tang Sect is indeed very weird. They use different formations every round. Don't tell me they're still capable of more tricks like Bei. On the other side, the Holy Ghost Sect's formation was much simpler. Lu Gengjang and Tang Dai stood in front, while while Yanfeng and Gu stood behind them. The four of them formed a simple square. Seeing that both parties were already in position and had no intention of changing, Zhang Zan took in a deep breath before shouting, "Fight, start." The members of both teams unleashed their martial souls immediately. Hikaitu's 6 soul rings shone. Following this, a binding light surfaced on his chest. The rest of them also unleashed their own martial souls. Dazzling soul rings started to rise. Zhang Zan was a class 9 soul engineer. Among the 10 competitors on the stage right now, only Hikaitu was a soul engineer. Thus, he naturally paid close attention to Hikaitu's performance. As the tournament reached this stage, all the soul engineering sects had been kicked out. Hikaitu was the sole remaining soul engineer. It was very difficult to tell if Huo Yuao was a soul master or a soul engineer. Seeing that Hikaitu was immediately using his class 7 binding light, Zhang Zan furrowed his brow. This idiot. Why is he using his binding light right now? Doesn't he know that its effective range is only 6 meters? This is a mistake he shouldn't be making. He's only a class 6 soul engineer. The binding light will greatly deplete his soul power. Furthermore, the binding light will start to consume his soul power the moment he opens the barrel. How can he move under such circumstances? Don't tell me that an opponent will sacrifice himself by charging towards the binding light. Zhang Zan felt that he would admonish Hikaitu after this fight was over, if he were the young man's teacher. The 4 evil soul masters also unleashed their martial souls. Lu Gengjang was the first to make a move. He exerted force through his legs and leapt up. He didn't jump too high, only leaping 2 meters into the air, and only charging forward for 4 or 5 meters. However, he ballooned the moment he jumped up. By the time he landed, his black robe had already burst open. He had become an extremely huge and terrifying monster. After unleashing his martial soul, Lu Gengjang grew to more than 5 meters in height. He was extremely plump, making him look like a giant meatball. His thick legs were extremely short. When he landed on the ground, everyone from the Tang Sect felt it quake beneath their feet. A loud crunching also resonated from the stage. What kind of monster is this? All the spectators were stunned when they witnessed this. Lu Gengjang was like an obese man. His body was exuding waves of dark green soul power. The strange thing was that these undulations were like an arrhythmic fog as they rose around his body. His head puffed up into a ball, and his blood-red eyes looked very fierce. His 6 soul rings seemed extremely large because of his huge body. The scary thing was that the pieces of fat on his arms and shoulders seemed to have been stitched together. His skin appeared as patches. He opened his mouth wide and saliva flowed from it continuously. As it landed on the steel plates on the ground, gusts of smoke rose. When they saw him, everyone from the Tang Sect couldn't help but recall Feng Ling. However, Feng Ling was terrifying because of his stinky breath. The saliva of this obese guy in front of them now was much more terrifying. After he ballooned in size, Lu Gengjang charged towards the Tang Sect with a swaying motion. Everyone from the Tang Sect was shocked when they saw him. What is his martial soul? Only Huo Yuao's eyes flashed coldly. Abomination. It's a terrifying spectre. It feeds on corpses to enhance its strength. Once it's hurt, it can devour corpses to recover. Its abilities should include speed, control, and assault. It's a very strong, comprehensive, and evil martial soul. Take extreme caution against it. The dark green aura around it should be poison. It's actually an abomination. Huo Yuao was inwardly horrified. Although he could point out the characteristics of this abomination, it was actually his first time seeing one. He had learned everything about this abomination from Electrolux. Even in the world of spectres, abominations were ranked among the top. Next to Lu Gengjang, Tang Dai also took big steps forward. He wasn't as forceful as Lu Gengjang as he leapt forward. However, the transformations to his body weren't any less terrifying. His body grew in size with every step he took. When he arrived beside Lu Gengjang, he was actually half a meter taller than him. However, he wasn't as fat as the abomination. He had turned into a huge skeleton made of dark gold bones. The transformations to both of their bodies were too weird. The spectators couldn't help but exclaim things in revulsion. Up on the main stage, Shu Tianran furrowed his brow. He suddenly felt that it was a mistake to let the Holy Ghost Sect compete in this tournament. Their existence was too much for ordinary people and soul masters to take. The Sun Moon Empire's officials revealed astonished looks on their faces, and they couldn't conceal their disgust. The disgust towards specters had been like this since time immemorial. This time wasn't an exception. Shu Tianran sighed in his heart. It seemed like he couldn't let the Holy Ghost Sect win in the end. Otherwise, he would be under great pressure within his own empire regardless of what happened to the other empires on the continent. These evil soul masters were better kept in the dark. As he thought of this, he made a decision. It was fine if the Holy Ghost Sect lost this semi-final match. Even if they won, he would make them forfeit the final and give the championship to Shrek Academy. Compared to his position in the empire, losing the championship to Shrek Academy wouldn't affect the empire's reputation. Skeleton King. Its physical and energy defenses are very strong. It's adept at physical assault, but its flaw lies in its inability to attack at range. Huo Yuao immediately warned his teammates as he saw Tang Dai's transformations. At the same time, he was also doubtful. It seems like many of these evil soul masters are related to specters. The Zhongli brothers that I met earlier were very adept at controlling souls. Wang Xiaolei was also a witch demon that was similar to a specter. These two's martial souls also seem like an abomination and a skeleton king. They are some of the strongest martial souls among specters. No wonder they're able to represent the Holy Ghost Sect to compete. Yan Fang and Gu were both blocked by the skeleton king and abomination. However, it was a pity that their opponent was the Tang Sect. With Huo Yuao's spiritual detection, there was no way they could conceal themselves. An icy blue halo lit up beneath Yan Feng's feet. This halo appeared along with his soul rings. The halo spread outward as his body became stronger. Dragon scales started to surface on his skin, tearing away his black cloak. Yan Feng was the only other evil soul master who had seemed like a human, apart from Tanya. He was extremely handsome. As the dragon scales surfaced on his body, he grew in size. His gaze also became sharper, and his cold aura soared. His soul rings rose quickly. 2 yellow, 2 purple, and 3 black soul rings. 7 ring soul sage. He was actually a soul sage. He was an evil soul sage, just like Tanya. When everyone from the Tang Sect saw Yan Feng's 7 soul rings, they became very serious. If not for the fact that Bei Bei had gotten rid of 2 6-ringed evil soul masters and caused the 7-ring Tanya to lose control, they might have been completely suppressed in a 7 versus 7 fight, since the Holy Ghost Sect had 2 evil soul sages. Even now, they were in a dire situation. Yan Feng was a soul sage, while the rest were all soul emperors. Gu's martial soul was a long bone staff. The bone staff was made of white bones, and 3 meters long. There was a silver gray skull at the tip of the staff, whose eyes burned with a dim purple flame. He was a very strong evil soul master, who lifted his bone staff, and Yan Feng bent his body slightly before 2 huge wings opened on his back. The wings were icy blue and made of bones, connected by bluish gray light. When the wings opened up, they spanned close to 6 meters across. They beat once, and he rose into the air, drifting over in front of Lu Gengjang and Tang Dai. Ground-based, air-based, and long distance. The 4 of them were adept in different areas, along with Tanya, who was adept at control, Wang Xiaolei, who was adept at long-range attacks and control, and Ji Li, who was adept at both attacking and defending. They formed an extremely terrifying team. In the history of the Continental Elite Youth Soul Master Tournament, they were one of the strongest teams ever in terms of fighting strength. It wasn't even too far-fetched to say that they were the strongest team to ever compete. It was obvious that Bei Bei's contribution in the individual elimination round had been very important. The Abomination and Skeleton King charged forward at the same time, both appearing very clumsy as they lumbered over. Up in the air, Yan Feng's icy blue light became stronger and stronger. He also advanced with the other 2, who lifted his bone staff, and a ball of purple light took form at the tip of the staff. A purplish halo surfaced on each of the other 3 evil soul masters' bodies in front of him. Let's begin. Shu Sanchi shouted. He lifted his shield of the Swanwu turtle, and an intense black light suddenly shone. His 4th soul ring also lit up as his actions were obscured by Hikaitu's burly figure. Hikaitu also instantly turned around and faced Shu Sanchi. Xiao unleashed her 3 live soul crush cauldron and surrounded Shu Sanchi in the middle of them. What were they doing? The answer was revealed immediately. As black lights flashed, Shu Sanchi disappeared. Someone else immediately replaced him, appearing in the center of the other 5 Tang Sect members. Shrek's 7 monsters had once used this strategy in the previous tournament. In this tournament, Shu Sanchi had used the mysterious underworld displacement before. However, he had kept his strategy a secret until now to deal with their strongest opponent. Huo Yuao didn't choose Tang Dai, Lu Gengjang or Yan Feng. He chose Gu instead, who was there to support the other 3. It was very easy for him to make this decision. Lu Gengjang and Tang Dai were too big. The Tang Sect's formation would likely be forced out of shape if neither of them were displaced. At the same time, both of their martial souls were defensively sound, while Yanfeng was a soul sage. Huo Yuao wasn't confident in getting rid of them quickly, so he shifted his target to Gu'u, who was only a soul emperor, but whose abilities were long-range, controlling, and auxiliary in nature. With the guidance of spiritual detection, Xu Sanqi's mysterious underworld displacement still took effect even though he couldn't see or be seen by his opponents. Instantly, both of them shifted positions. Gu'u was astonished to discover that he was in enemy territory. He was even encircled. The Tang Sect was prepared. Wang Dong'er pulled Huo Yuao's wheelchair and leapt backward, along with the other 4 members of the team. Xiao's 3 cauldrons were unleashed at this moment. With a loud boom, the cauldron's quaking tremble sounded. Gu'u had only just appeared, but the immense impact force of the cauldron struck him immediately. Gu'u was still a little confused, but he was already completely trapped. They weren't completely defenseless against Xu Sanqi's mysterious underworld displacement. After all, the Tang Sect did use it a couple of times earlier in the tournament. While they found out that this skill could be considered a divine skill for a defense-type Soulmaster, the Soulmaster had to first be able to lock onto his opponent's position. The remaining 4 evil Soulmasters were all extremely strong, except for Gu'u. The other 3 would be very resistant, even if they were encircled, and could still unleash their great fighting strength. As such, they weren't afraid of being displaced. They were also prepared for it. Gu'u was shielded by the Skeleton King and Abomination. He was an auxiliary type and control-type Soulmaster. As long as he wasn't locked onto by Xu Sanqi, he naturally didn't have to be afraid. When he unleashed his abilities, he might even be scarier than the other 3. However, who would have expected Xu Sanqi to displace him without knowing his position? This sudden change in events caused Gu'u to panic. While the Holy Ghost Church was an evil Soulmaster sect, they were even more persistent than the Body Sect in their belief in a Soulmaster's abilities, and despised soul tools. This was also why none of the evil Soulmasters were equipped with invincible barriers. Otherwise, Bei Bei wouldn't have found it so easy to kill them earlier. Gu'u was indeed a strong evil soul master. When he discovered that he was trapped, his 6th soul ring shone without any hesitation. As the black soul ring flashed, his body started to contort. Xiao's cauldron quaking tremble brushed past him, but didn't have any effect on him. Void. It was an extremely strong soul skill. This soul skill enabled one's body to become like air, and made one resistant to physical and soul power attacks. More accurately speaking, these 2 types of attacks were ineffective against him after his void took effect. In the Holy Ghost Church, only the outstanding disciples had the opportunity to obtain such a soul skill with the help of the higher-ups. In critical moments, it might even be more effective than an invincible barrier. However, void didn't protect one against everything. Huo Yuao was also put in a difficult spot right now. Golden light flashed from his forehead, and his vertical eye lit up. Gu'u couldn't attack, as he was in his void state. When his 3 teammates realized something was amiss, Xu Sanqi was already behind them. Patches of black light surged. It was Swanwu's domain. In order to delay the 3 of them, Xu Sanqi used the strength of his domain. The 3 of them seemed to have fallen into a deep quagmire, and couldn't free themselves. Not only this, but his first soul ring also lit up. The mysterious underworld quake was unleashed. The black light in Swanwu's domain started to shake, causing the 3 evil Soulmasters to fall under Xu Sanqi's control in this domain. Xu Sanqi was already bleeding profusely right now. This was a sacrifice he was making to win the team round. His 6th soul skill wasn't easy to control. Along with the fact that his old injury had yet to recover, he was under great pressure as he unleashed all his strength, even though he had managed to trap his opponents. Purplish gold lights shone. Gu'u let out a pathetic scream. His black bamboo hat and veil were struck off his head, revealing his pale white face and bald head. However, his head seemed to be in a very disastrous condition right now. There was blood oozing out everywhere, and his body seemed to be very unstable. His void was indeed capable of keeping out most physical and soul power attacks. However, it couldn't keep out spiritual power. Huo Yuao hated the Holy Ghost Sect immensely, and thus he immediately used his strongest tactic against them the moment he made a move. He used his Eye of Destiny and Spiritual Shock. The purplish gold light was like a sharp sword stabbing deep into his opponent's soul. Gu'u was instantly wrenched out of his void state. A golden hexagram array was unleashed at this point. As it rose, it landed on Gu'u's body at the same time as the binding light, which appeared behind his back. Without his void, how could he resist being bound? Moreover, Gu'u's mind was completely blank at this point, as his soul had been greatly damaged. Wang Dong'er's wings opened, and she drifted up into the air at the same time as she used her hexagram array. As her body flashed, she arrived in front of Gu'u. She lifted her right hand and pointed her index finger 1 inch away from Gu'u's forehead. Her right hand turned golden. Although she only pointed one finger, her fingertip seemed to shine like a small sun. An oxair like golden light flashed before disappearing. Gu'u leaned his head back, and golden light penetrated through the back of his head before disappearing in the air. His body went completely stiff. At that instant, the other 3 evil soul masters knew that Gu'u was dead. When they saw Gu'u being forced out of his void state by Huo Yuao's spiritual shock, they knew he was a dead man. They were indeed vicious. They didn't try to break free from Xu Sanqi's Swanwu's domain. Rather, they turned around at the same time and charged towards him. Since one of them had already died, they had to drag at least one person from the Tang Sect down with him. Xu Sanqi was extremely important to the Tang Sect. Without their defense-type soulmaster, the Tang Sect would find it difficult to resist the 3 of them. The 3 of them were indeed very strong. Tang Dai lifted his arms, and his black, bony arms turned into 2 pitch black bone blades that slashed out at the same time. He managed to carve a path through the domain. Lu Gengjiang exuded a crimson red glow, increasing his speed in the domain. He charged towards Xu Sanqi maniacally and opened his mouth. It seemed like he wanted to swallow the other whole. Yanfeng was still the scariest one. He exuded a strong, icy blue glow, and his body expanded even further as he flew. As his wings flapped forward, 2 streaks of fog-like, icy blue light shot towards Xu Sanqi. Wherever the 2 streaks of lights passed, Xu Sanqi's Swanwu's domain seemed like it was frozen in place. No matter how strong Xu Sanqi was, he was still immediately placed in a precarious position against 3 evil soulmasters whose cultivations weren't inferior to his. On the other side of the stage, Huo Yuao and the rest immediately acted after getting rid of Gu'u. Jiang Nanan and Xiao increased their speed as they burst forward towards their opponents. He released his Class 7 Eye of Fear into the air. It was simply too important in this team round. With it, their opponents would be very unsettled and cautious. Huo Yuao and Wang Dong'er were the strangest. After Wang Dong'er's broken devil of light blew apart Gu'u's brain, she revolved in the air and landed in Huo Yuao's chair. She bent her knees and landed in Huo Yuao's lap. At the same time, she opened her arms wide and grabbed his neck. Thanks so much for watching this video. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe. Also leave a comment down below with suggestions on what novels to read.